Good day from Embry-Riddle Worldwide Headquarters in Daytona Beach to wherever you are. I am Alexander Siedschlag, the Dean of the Embry-Riddle Worldwide College of Arts and Sciences, and I am hosting the Resilience Reimagined virtual esteemed speaker series for the first half of this year, which is also the centennial year of Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, proudly celebrating our 100th birthday. And this month of March is actually our birthday celebrated month. So we were chartered in 1925, but assumed operations, the Embry-Riddle company, our precursor, started operations in spring 1926, and March is our birthday celebrated. So welcome. This is great. But the 6-month series brought to you by Resilience Reimagined is focused on emergency management leadership, and that series is within Resilience Reimagined brought to you by Dennis Caliyo, one of our Embry-Riddle alums, and the Disaster Services Director in the Emergency Disaster Services Department of the Salvation Army USA Western Territory, joining us from California. Always good to see you. Thanks for joining again, Dennis. You are a very known leadership series provider and subject matter expert. You were kind enough to bring another subject matter expert to the meeting today, who will share his expertise and knowledge, and that is Paul Peissner of the Convoy of Hope, and he will talk about faith in action, Convoy of Hope's whole community role and whole community in resilience building, and then also in emergency management is and remains, if not becomes, more important than ever these days. So welcome, Paul. Welcome back, Dennis. And with that, can I turn it over to you, Dennis, please? And also, I want to say, before I do that, if you have any questions, you can either hold them towards the end where we'll do live Q&A, or as we move along, you would also be encouraged to post your questions on the chat, and we are going to pick them up from there. Now, with that, really over to you, Dennis, and thanks again.
Thank you, Doctor, and I appreciate it. And happy birthday to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University for having such a successful year and 100 years, and I give you another 100 years to come. It's always a pleasure and honor to see all the smiling faces. Real quick in the chat, just go ahead and type in the place, location where you're from, and your favorite animal. And I hope you have good animals out there. It could be as exotic as you can articulate it to be, but there's a lot to be said about good animals. For the past 3 months, I've been talking about leadership in disaster. And as promised, I said I was going to give you a different dialogue, and I want this to be a discussion. And for today, we're focusing on the whole community approach. Salvation Army has been around for about 140 years. And we do this because we love the fact that, one, we're serving the needs of the community, but we can't do it doing it alone. So we bring in partners. So it is my privilege and honor to introduce to you my guest and also my mentor, Paul Peissner. He's also known as the ambassador for Convoy of Hope. And if you've never heard of Convoy of Hope, after this brief, I guarantee you will learn about Convoy of Hope. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Paul, my mentor, and I'm just going to go on the back end here and just monitor the chat. And if you have any questions, Paul will take those questions at the end. So again, I appreciate it. I'm going to have to step away. Paul, the floor is yours, sir.
Nice. Thank you so much. I've never seen a pet platypus. So Nate, I think you get the most unique pet in the history of the world ever, which is awesome. And then Tanya, you would love my neighborhood. In the summertime, we have like about 20 owls that surround our neighborhood, and they all talk to each other all night. It's very cool. Yeah, so
amazing.
I'm not gonna see. Whenever I go to Florida, being a Californian, I've always swam in bodies of water, and I started to go out to go for a swim in a lake at a timeshare, and someone stopped me, reminded me that I'm in Florida and there's gators in the water. So I had to I had to pause. With like great respect for long distance swimmers in Florida because I don't know where you guys work out. Whew. So, Claire, I couldn't live in Florida because I couldn't stay out of the water. So my name is Paul Peissner. I grew up in California. I'm part of a family that grew up with tragedy and crisis. And when there was a small little family of four, um, their dad is off to work. He was happened to be a pastor. He was going to a meeting, and a drunk driver killed him. And it wasn't a big regional disaster, but for the four kids, losing their dad and having their mom in the car took about a year to get him back. Um, it was an incredible crisis for them. They were shuffled around. They finally ended up at a friend's house, all four kids living in a trailer park. It was like a three-bedroom trailer. They stayed there for about a year until their house um, was completed. Their dad was in the middle of rebuilding the house. And so people from the community rebuilt the house and brought food over. And that was the beginning of an organization called Convoy of Hope. Um, you know, almost 50 years ago today, um, they were supported for over a year with food coming to their house, and it became part of the routine for many of the community members. They would bring extra food over to this family to help them get by. And as the family got older, people would still bring food, which they didn't need, but they would always know who was in greater need. And so they kind of always grew up knowing who the extra food should go to. Um, and it was about 40 years ago, we just started getting truckloads of food from farms and other places. And it was just a group of us that would just deliver it to individuals out there. Um, it did get to the point where there was a semi that got donated to the group. And that's when we changed the name to Convoy of Hope. And Convoy of Hope is now 35 years old. We're considered the 27th largest nonprofit in the United States. We respond to well over 100 disasters around the world. We would respond to more if we had more capabilities. But when we commit to a disaster, we commit 1 year of support to that location. So we're very careful about what we support. We don't just drop in for 2 weeks and run away. Salvation Army has been a huge partner for us because they come in, set up the food lines, we can supply food. And we do feed about 680,000 kids every day in 40 different countries around the world. It's a logistics coordination strategy that starts, on the farms in the Midwest of people that have more than enough that are willing to share. So the unique thing about Convoy of Hope is that we get $0 from the government. We oftentimes respond faster to disasters than the government does. So if you're in Florida, Convoy of Hope is usually the first truck on scene in any Florida disaster. So Red Cross reports to us. We bring in the food before the hurricanes will hit, and we stay for a year afterwards. We're still delivering to the East Coast to many of the cities that were impacted by the last hurricane. Part of what we wanted to do was today, I wanted to kind of share a slide deck about disasters and what we've learned over the 35 years of doing this. The headquarters have moved from California to Springfield, Missouri. If you ever get a chance to go up there, our disaster location is a separate building. It is an amazing facility to go through. We have 3 replicated trucks for disaster response, 3 sets of trucks. So close to about 50 trucks that we have. One set in Atlanta in a new facility we built out there. 2 sets, redundant sets in Springfield, Missouri, in case we have a north and south storm or disaster that hits. So we do have 3 response teams. Everything is outside of the folks that coordinate those vehicles and the resources. Everybody else is a volunteer. So our unique position in industry is we get no money from the government. We're the 27th largest nonprofit in the United States, and we have 0 last mile employees, people that actually hand products to people who are out there. But we bring the products to the area, and we get local volunteers to help us with disaster relief. We do this because we've noticed a couple things. First, in a disaster, the most amazing thing that happens is that we see communities come to life. People who don't talk to each other, have a lot of differences, suddenly realize that they're all in one community facing a shared disaster, and they have a desire to help each other. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But knowing that you're going to have folks that will step up and want to help, they want to take care of themselves and survive, but they also want to help their neighbors. That is an asset that can be leveraged and supported and encouraged. Oftentimes, the nonprofits or the NGOs that come in don't include the local community that has a heart to want to help. They tell them to stand down, let the professionals do it. The reality is you need to let those volunteers, because the professionals are going to come in and go out. And really, it's going to take more than a year for people to get restored from a devastating disaster. We can get them through the difficult season, but the reality is they go through a long journey. And unless the people and their neighbors are seen as the heroes, they'll feel isolated and alone when the disaster recovery groups pack up and leave in a couple of weeks or in 3 weeks. So we're really insistent that the superpowers and the heroes of a disaster are already living through the disaster. They're there. You just have to find them. And we see this in every place we go. I'm going to move my slide along here. Give me 1 second. There we go. What I wanted to do was highlight a disaster in my area, which was Paradise. This was a fire that came out of nowhere. It just was a small little grass fire that turned into a forest fire that ended up burning down 18,000 structures. It took the lives of 85 people. It was in a little town called Paradise. Paradise is now just a shadow of itself. Very few buildings continue to stand there. But what was amazing and remarkable for us was really to see how neighbors saved neighbors. There's even a movie out in the theater that's out there that you can see. This is where, the bus driver drives through the tree. The trees are on fire to get the kids out of there. But it wasn't just the bus driver. There were pickup trucks that were loading people in, laying them down and driving them out. They were evacuating complete strangers, people trapped in the middle of the city, surrounded by fire, and people driving through the fire ring as fast as they could to get people in and out of the area. And so it was amazing. And all of the neighbors were the first responders. The neighbors came together. They beat the state of California, FEMA, everybody. And if you don't have a plan, you have to hope for amazing, heroic individuals to think clearly enough to figure out how you're out there. But if you do have a plan and people are willing to invest, it's actually amazing to watch how the machine of disaster response just comes to life when people know what to do. So the point we want to make with the Paradise Fire is that before official responders even arrived, the community became their own responsive system. And it's a natural phenomena that happens in all major disasters. And it's something that many of the response teams don't even take into consideration. They don't plan for that wave of interested volunteers. They tend to push them away instead of embrace them and give them focus and allow them to participate. It's what they want to do. So we have this phenomena called the Olympics. Happens every 4 years when we have people that are big Florida sports fans, and you've got people that are New York sports fans, and they don't necessarily get along together in social environments. You've got people from different political sides, left and right. You've got people that come from different classes or different walks of life that tend to have biases towards other groups. But when when the Olympics hit, everybody gets behind the people that represent our country. We become one team. We root for the individuals that hold up the flag, that are part of our culture. And it's a very unique experience to see millions of people who disagree on everything in the world come together and agree and celebrate the victories of the individuals that represent our nation. And it's pretty amazing. We cheer for the athletes. We celebrate the victories together. A lot of high fives with people who don't normally would ever high five each other. They celebrate. But the same thing is true with disasters. If you think about like a wildfire, an earthquake, or a flood, it's same thing happens again. Suddenly, all the barriers and all the differences, it just doesn't matter. We belong to each other. We're neighbors. The neighborhood becomes a team. Strangers become kind of helpers, and our neighbors who hardly ever talk to each other suddenly become friendly. They're sharing food. They're helping the elderly and the vulnerable. They're organizing they're sharing supplies with each other. For a temporary season, all the social differences go away. And for a moment, we become one team, which is amazing. The phenomena by Charles Fritz, this won't be on the test. It's called therapeutic community, and it's a natural phenomena that happens during a disaster. The community starts to take care of each other, no matter how different they are from each other. And if there's an opportunity, these people will be super cooperative, very generous. They'll volunteer, and they protect the most vulnerable in a disaster situation. But it is short-lived, and it will go away. And it's kind of a harsh reality. If there's no training or structure to sustain it after the immediate rush of a disaster challenge, they typically will walk away. So this is where I want to introduce Convoy of Hope. We have been for 35 years. We've been responding to almost 100 disasters a year. And what we found is if we can supply the resources to help people, we can make them feel super powerful. We can amplify and accelerate the relationship building. We can help the local individuals who have a heart to take care of others build those relationships that will last longer than the immediate disaster event. And that's what our hope for is. We want to make sure that the individuals that are willing to help are seen as the heroes. And so we empower heroes to take our resources and gift it to the people in need, whether it's food, water, a mask, a blanket, any of those resources that we show up with. The convoy trucks will roll typically within an hour in Florida. They'll park and stay in Alabama, and we'll drive in as soon as the hotel and the storm is cleared. We immediately drive in our food, water, and ice into those areas because a lot of electricity will be out. And we just know that one of the first things people will feel is a concern for their next meal, or their concern for connectedness. So they come out of their homes looking to get some support or find a friend, to find someone who will help them get through this next day. And we found that if we can show up and we can use whatever communities that we're familiar with, it will amplify and accelerate the ability to get out there. So Convoy has a long history of working with businesses that donate food, but also with churches that donate volunteers. Since we don't have any last mile paid for staff, we leverage the largest gathering of demographic people in the United States, which happens to gather on our weekends for our services. Our faith communities are amazing gifts if they can be encouraged to kind of get out to the street and be part of those conversations. What you'll find is people will ask 3 questions after a disaster. They're surviving and they're self-sustaining. They're not in harm's way. They want to know who to help, right? They want to know where are people gathering, and they want to know what to do next. And those are the 3 things that we want to be able to show up for. And we can help with the first 2. What they do next really is either something we can just haphazardly help people figure out how to set up a food line or how to set up a food distribution efforts, or what kinds of things we see out there. But the reality is, if they've gone through any kind of community training, they self-organize. It's also another phenomenon that's called emergent behavior. Emergent behavior is this ability to see a problem, and you see different categories of services, and people will gravitate to the weakest link, the thing that isn't being served the most, and they'll fill that gap. They just intuitively see what you're trying to do, and they'll jump in somewhere in the line. They'll jump in and want to help, and it's amazing to watch emergent volunteerism happen. The behavior is pretty cool. You just have to say, we need to get it to there, and they self-organize. You don't have to tell them what to do. Again, it's part of that volunteerism with the therapeutic community. They want to be there. You give them a goal, and they create teams of people to accomplish that goal. It's one of the best things you can do in a disaster. And again, we do it strategically because we realize that we're going to come and go, but the neighbors are going to be there forever. And if we can get them to build relationships during this little window, they'll be better equipped for long-term recovery capabilities. So it is an interesting thing. The people that you should be helping, the folks that, tragically, we can tell their stories by where we find bodies. People that live alone, are isolated, oftentimes don't know emergencies are coming. They'll be the last to know because they don't have a network of people looking out for them. The elderly, as soon as emergency hits, power goes out, and in the Paradise fires, we found bodies of elderly people. When their power goes out, they can't open the garage door. They're not strong enough to lift the garage door, and unless there's a neighbor checking in on them, Many of them were burned alive in their cars trying to back out of their garages, but the garage door wouldn't open. It's pretty tragic, but it's something that, in your neighborhood, knowing who the elderly folks are, who are the disabilities out there. And the other thing is with kids, kids will amplify whatever energy they see their parents or the trusted adult who's taking care of them. It's super important for that trusted adult to have a perception of being calm and giving them some kind of comfort. Because if they don't see that, the emotional instability of a kid can really hurt the efforts of rescue and also really traumatize a kid for a prolonged period of time, make them so that they're incapacitated. The other thing is having injury capabilities to repair Band-Aids and antiseptics. Little teeny injuries in a disaster end up flooding a hospital because they get infected, they get complicated, they didn't get addressed on scene, and they worsen over time with exposure to some of the elements of a disaster. So having a first aid kit in a go bag is super important. Being able to treat them, and also realizing that people in trauma oftentimes just need a conversation starter. They just need to be brought back to reality and connect with another person. So some of the most powerful things you can do is just check in with people to say, how are you doing? Ask that question, have them self-assess. If it's a kid, you can hand them a blanket, a toy, some kind of snack food, and just make it feel like that you've got this and that we're going to work our way through that process. In terms of gathering, people want to gather in parks, at churches, and parking lots, and in outdoor places like malls. There's natural places where they want to gather, and identifying those areas where a neighborhood should do that is something in a training program you should talk about. Also, having the neighborhood that does prep for a disaster know where the elderly and the disabled folks are, so that in teams of 2, they can walk around after a disaster and just check on the neighborhood to see if there's people that still need assistance to clear debris to get out of their houses, or to be able to reestablish communications out there. So I'm going to take you to our vision for a disaster. Now, this isn't written in stone. This is just kind of like ideally what we'd love to see in a disaster community, a disaster-ready community. First of all, having a go bag. Everybody talks about a go bag. Are you guys all familiar with go bags? Has anybody talked about what that looks like? Just if you've seen a thumbs up on the chat, that would be great. If you know what a go bag is, it's great. Otherwise, I'll take a couple minutes to walk you through. Okay, I see one. All right. Well, let me just walk through it. So a go bag is intended for you to leave your house within 15 minutes. It should have a copy of your license, your passport, any kind of information. It should, if you have kids, it should have a little black book of family members, contact information, instructions on when they're coming home from school, what route will they go to, and the 3 places you want them to visit. You want them to walk home first to see that you can find them. You want them to go to a next door neighbors. If both of those are not able to shelter the kids, then you want them to go to a neighbor, a friend that's further away, but you want to know exactly what route they will use if they get separated, so you know where to find them. That way parents can drive the route. They can check the 3 locations. And normally, if you give the kids a plan and they're familiar with it, they'll execute against it, knowing that they're trying to get back to a form of stability. The other thing, a go bag is intended for 24 hours. It should get you through an emergency where you have to be out of your house for just a day. And so it can't be too heavy, but it also can't be too empty. You want to make sure you've got, enough nutrition inside there. You want to make sure it's all lightweight food. You don't want too much water in a go bag, but you also want a stay box. And a stay box is intended for 96 hours here in California. In disaster conversations in the United States, FEMA has been reduced in its role, and states are expected to do coverages. And right now, the state is saying that it needs 96 hours to get to people, no matter where they live. It could be shorter, but 96 hours is worst case scenario in terms of how long the state would get before it could get to a community that's in need. But it's because they're not set up as a disaster response organization with all the equipment as a standalone. They're building up for that. They're trying to build it out. So here in California, we've never set the expectation that we need to go more than 48 hours. I'm just watching the clock here. But 96 hours is the new standard for us. And we need to have what we call stay boxes. This is bigger supplies of water. It's in a box. It's in the garage. It's food that you replace it once a year. So it's got to have some longevity capabilities to it. But you have it out in the garage. You bring it in the house. And if there's no power, electricity, you've got something that will sustain you for 96 hours until the state can set up some kind of systems of food substance. We'll get, Salvation Army to come in. We'll get the Red Cross to come in, start to address those food lines to get food back into the areas. Typically, it takes us 96 hours to get grocery stores power back on and food made available to the community itself. So that's kind of our challenge. The way we want people to gather is identify a local spot, a local church, someone you can walk to in your neighborhood where everybody can check in. You can identify who's not there and stop by their homes to kind of check in on them to make sure they're okay. Those are just what we call what we call neighborhood sites. They're typically hot chocolate, coffee, tea, water, and something to eat, something light to eat that a church could stockpile at a closet near the front lobby area and could make it available to anybody who wants to walk in. Next, what we found in Ukraine was that if a church can actually, or an organization, or we say church because that was what has historically been available to us, if they can put a generator together, if the grid goes down, they can at least power up their laptops, their cell phones. They can stay for up to 8 hours at a time. They can get replacements for food, what we call shelf-stable food, to take home. They wouldn't necessarily be served the meals there. But in counties and cities, there should be a central place for those who have lost shelter where they can go not only just rest, but also go get some sleep and also get some hot meals. And those are more concentrated areas exclusively for people who don't have shelters to stay in. And those are the 3 sites. So for Convoy, we just need to know where the identified shelters are going to, or the hub's going to be, where the shelters or the centers going to be that we need to drop off, or they need to be connecting and getting food from their hubs, and then how we support or help and assist the smaller sites that have larger number of homes that are inaccessible. We want to make sure we know where those are pretty quickly so we can help FEMA or the responding agency know where we're seeing most of the concern, where we're seeing the largest gatherings that aren't going home. They're staying at their sites or their centers, or they're moving towards their hubs. That way they can kind of identify who needs the most help in a disaster situation. Training people in the Midwest, Convoy does this all the time. We bring in fire departments, we bring in first responders to come in and train volunteers to be able to say, I'm going to get CERT trainified. I'm going to be identified as a food line cook. I'm going to be there to unload a truck or help to kind of redistribute stuff. So we'll have a number of trainings, including not a forklift, but a hand truck program where we teach people how to move hand trucks so the pallets of food that get brought in can be moved around gracefully, just so they're familiar with the equipment. What we found is that resilient communities aren't necessarily built during disasters. They're really built before and afterwards, or before them with plans to continue that work afterwards. So the most resilient communities do a front side training before disaster, and afterwards they stay in relationship with the organizations because we know people want to help each other. And we want to take advantage of that. We want them to be empowered and to have a goal and a focus on what they're doing. So yeah, it's a heartbreaking event, but it also can be a really community gathering event. The difference between the Paradise fires in Northern California that burnt a city down that was not prepared, and the fires that burned down the Napa community, that Napa area community is bouncing back. The neighbors are helping to build their own houses along with the construction workers. The insurance doesn't do the front yards, the backyards, and the neighbors are doing that themselves. It's really creating this whole community and a culture that was formulated around a tragic situation, but it's part of their journey back to restoration. They're really helping each other out. The one thing we wanted to point out is in a disaster situation, oftentimes the program that we talk about is designed to address the immediate response to a disaster and getting people to a place where they're not in harm's way. Their life is not threatened in the short term. But the reality is their emotions go through a huge drop right after that honeymoon experience where they feel the benefit of support coming around them in a disaster situation. Many of those organizations go home, they pack up, and the reality of what it's going to take to get back on their feet or get back to normal is a painful reality. This survey was done in the Napa area, where they have done an incredible job in terms of restorative work to get the community back, and they're thriving. But it's been a long journey, and they had the presence of mind to document the emotional journey in terms of what that would look like and what people were feeling. And we were able to put this, this chart together, which is true of any emergency, but not necessarily tracked by the emergency response groups. But this is what the community sees in a disaster. They see a long journey back, and it does take about a year to get back on their feet itself. So I do have questions. I do want to make sure that, first of all, I answer the question about the go bag. And I saw the comment there by Nate that you had the experience of 9/11. That was painful to take your go bag and go. But a go bag is just kind of some of these are examples of what goes in a go bag, what goes in a stay box, and then what a plan we call the little black book of activity would look like. You want to make sure you have the known weather alert systems kind of written down so you can go check on those. You also want to decide which neighbors to meet up with or how you can help each other before there's a disaster, just a kind of a verbal agreements that are out there. And in the context of, what I was proposing is neighborhood sites are just gathering sites that can handle local communities that everybody can walk to. Community centers are places where people can either drive together or carpool to. And then central hubs are where people are going to have to stay overnight. They're going to be surviving off of hot meals. It's a centralized care facility model, whatever that looks like for the community itself. So going back here, any questions you guys have for me? I mean, I would love to take questions and hear about your own experiences, or if I overlook something, I would love to hear that too.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Paul. And I've seen no questions registered on the chat. If you are more comfortable typing than asking live, you would still be able to put your questions or comments or sharing of experience in the chat. Otherwise, this is also your opportunity to open your mic and switch your camera on and engage with Paul and engage Paul. So who wants to go first? And if you could either way briefly take a second to introduce yourself, who you are, what you are doing, and as a courtesy. So who wants to be first? Oh, Nate, please go ahead. Yes.
Hey, Paul, thanks. This was a really interesting presentation. I was curious, at the beginning, you talked about how the organization only seeks to get involved in places where it'll be there for a year, but also how quickly y'all are able to get on site. And so I'm curious, how are y'all making that determination so early about, okay, this is a place where we are really going to need to be involved for a long period of time before there's been an initial damage assessment?
And Nate,
That's a really good question.
Can you also tell us who you are?
Oh, yes, sir.
For
Sorry.
those who didn't know, I mean, thank you.
Nate Tenenfeld. I'm a associate professor in the Department of Human Factors, Safety, and Social Sciences.
And the program chair for our Master of Science in Human Factors as well. So
yes,
thank
sir.
you. Yeah.
Nice. So I have to answer your question correctly. So I'm going to go back. We got beat up by Mother Teresa. And it sounds funny, but I always say it that way. She didn't really beat us up. But the founder of the organization had a friend out in Calcutta, and he was co-writing a book with a physician who was caring for a lot of the folks in Calcutta. And he said, hey, there's some partner organization. I want you to go meet them. It was Mother Teresa across the street. And she was underwhelmed by our disaster response because she said, people have disasters every day, and you need to be able to help people every day. What are you doing to help individuals? And kind of the founder kind of paused on that and came back and said, you know what, guys, we don't just need to be helping in disasters. We need to be helping every day. So part of our superhero strength is that we get donated food, and we have 260,000 square feet of food in Springfield, Missouri. We have 120,000 square feet of food in Atlanta, Georgia. but that food has expiration dates on there. And when we get to 30 days, 60 days of expiration, we distribute it to the communities in need all the time. And what we're doing is establishing relationships with the places that are going to be the hardest hit. The wealthier the community, the less they need our services. That it's in generalities. Again, there might be individuals that need a lot of help, but the communities that get hit the hardest and stay hurt the longest are the communities that are barely surviving and they have food scarcity and poverty issues already surrounding them. They're not the communities that get highlighted on TV. They don't interview well. They tend not to get highlighted, but they're the folks that need the help the most. And so helping communities with food scarcity issues, knowing where those pockets of poverty are and how and who we work with, we tend to quickly know right where they're doing. We also have a war room, weather war room that tracks the world for disasters that are weather related. Doesn't help with earthquakes, doesn't help with volcanoes, but everything else, we can actually start to see winds across North Africa that will become potentially storms over the Atlantic that will then circle in the Caribbean and become a hurricane. So we can actually see the first elements of a disaster with the hyperactivity across North Africa. And we just kind of watch those natural phenomena that become disasters down the road. Not everyone does, but we go on to notification when we see a storm formulating. And then by the time we see the beginnings of a hurricane that looks like it's tracking towards land, we actually load the trucks and we drive the trucks to what we call we give them guidance. So they're on perimeter. They're not in harm's way. They're out of the storm circle. But as soon as the storm passes, they drive in. And again, we have a network of 400,000 community groups that contribute and support us when there's no disaster. There are eyes and ears around the world that tell us when there is a disaster, where to go first. FEMA will show up, but when we hear locally that there are people gathered and that there's a need, we'll take our trucks to the places where we know people are asking for that to come in. So the idea of serving on a regular basis to impoverished areas is key to our strategy. And then having trucks sit on the edge of a storm to drive in, having them prepared to go in, go as far as they can with the access they may have on the road. We also have a recovery team that we call them the Beaver Crew. The Beaver Crew is a coordinated chainsaw team that comes in before FEMA, and we chop up the trees that block the roads. And then after we clear the roadways with our volunteers, they'll go back to individuals who don't have capacity to clean up the fence, broken down fence or the trees, and we'll put the trees on the sidewalk. And so we go in with a series of volunteers. We first clear the way for the food, and then they go back and we set up a self-contained feeding program for all volunteers that come into that system.
Doing the Lord's work. I appreciate it.
You know what? It's there's a bunch of guys in Oklahoma that this was their idea, and so we just bought the equipment and the bunks, and we travel in and self-sustain everybody. And we found FEMA tends to focus on certain areas and certain items that they consider priorities, and we tend to focus on the people that are going to be hurt the longest. Other questions? Tanya, you're off, but go ahead. Let's go.
Hey, Paul. Tanya Corbin, for people who don't know me, I'm the department chair for the Department of Emergency Disaster and Global Security Studies. And I wanted to first say that I'm blown away by this work that you do. It's amazing. And I'm especially grateful that you think about the communities that are facing vulnerabilities before the disaster and that you support them for so long after, because you're right, as soon as all of the lights aren't shining on you anymore, right? That's when people really need the help the most. I wanted to ask you if, from your perspective, from this work that you've done, so I teach in the master's program for emergency managers, future emergency management folks. What do you wish that they knew when they come to support your work or to work with you in the community that maybe we could teach in our courses or work with that would help in the success of your response?
So I think there's two things that we see. First of all, if they understand what the community is trying to do after a disaster, the logic of how they go about doing things, they sometimes don't go straight after victims. They clear pathways to get the vehicles to the the victims. Going through certification training, understanding how emergency responders think, I think is key, because I think what they do is they bring their heart and their passion to the desire to help, and they get in the way. They're not prioritized the same way emergency response crews are designed. The reality is we need lots of hands, and so when our trucks arrive, we'll take all volunteers, because we're just trying to go from here to there. And so until there are emergency agencies that are there, take care of your neighborhood, help us with the food setups or food distribution efforts. If there is a truck, get food out of the truck, because the faster we get the truck emptied and loaded, we'll start the series. We own our own trucks. We typically have 30 or 40 trucks that will start a loop around in terms of dropping off food. Once we get guidance, we'll drop it off to the centralized location. But until then, we're dropping it off at decentralized places that have voiced concern for their communities, and we respond to those first. So, if we could do two things, families should have a go bag and a stay box. Most families do not. They're saying like 2 families out of every 100 that come to a center even know what those things are. They don't have them and they don't get them. And if a community could buy the backpacks and get it started, it's a huge help, because if you buy one for the family and you teach them what goes in there, and then you get them another one, say, and this goes to a neighbor, you get to choose who your neighbor is. It raises the consciousness of, oh, in a disaster, are you my friend, right? And bringing a go bag to a neighbor that's already started and explaining to them what you did with your go bag so they could do something like with theirs, it actually creates that consciousness about, hey, when there's a disaster, I know I need to take care of my neighbor. They took care of me before, and I need to take care of them afterwards. But it creates a community consciousness just by doing simple go bag creation processes. So yeah, I don't know if that helps. We have other team members. We have trainings. If you want to fly into Springfield, Missouri and be part of the chainsaw training crew, it's a very cool project. If you can afford the time off from work and to travel for a week after a disaster, it's absolutely critical. It was critical for the Texas floods and all of the fires in California. Trees that go down are our biggest challenge in terms of getting to people. In terms of what your school is working on, you guys are an avionics school. Is that true? So I'm a big fan. I come out of 30 years of tech. I used to just do the Convoy stuff as a part-time volunteer. Now I'm full-time. But I truly believe the standalone swarming of drones can actually identify humans and take our food to places we can't drive to. And I think in the future of hurricanes, being able to have drones that have a built-in mission and they work together, I think would be great, because they can identify where humans have gathered that we can't see, we can't hear, if there's no cell towers, and then getting food supply to them and a note passing process where they can write down where they are, injuries. If we can record that stuff on a camera and then get it back to responders once they get within range, I think would be huge in the future. I think that will solve a lot of the unfortunate situations where people are isolated so long that they run out of food and water. So there you go. I put something back on you, a project for you guys to think about.
I'm sorry, Hannah. I'm a emergency management student at Embry-Riddle State College in South Florida. You mentioned farmers in the Midwest donating food. Would they be donating crops directly or packaged food?
Well, so both. So like Kellanova, which used to be Kellogg's, all of the major food brands donate to us out of their excess. So they'll donate anywhere from a single pallet to one manufacturer donated 700 trucks, right? And so we can take it all and we can find a home for it if it fills up our warehouse. And then we have more than enough. We share with all the 1,500 nonprofits that we vetted across the United States that we work with. We actually are building a facility right now that will allow us to take more of what we call raw product. The raw product for us, we can create a menu, and we're hoping to generate by next year about 1 billion, well, by end of decade, 1 billion meals a year. That's made up of mostly raw product donated from farmers who make a living selling it to commercial, but also want to do good with some of their crops. and they want to donate it to us, and we can flip it into meals. Right now, we get those donations, but we spend a lot of money converting those raw commodities into meals and working with nutritionists to make sure that it matches what they call the palate flavors or the palate preferences of each of the communities. Here in the States, we see about 6 or 7 different palate preferences, just demographics. So creating food is a whole science to itself, but we'll be creating meals. These would be self-contained, just either heat them up, add water, or just eat them as is. But they'll be coming out of Springfield, Missouri. And, we ended up in Springfield, Missouri because, I don't know, some big retailer, Bass Pro, said, I got a warehouse. You guys can have it if you want to move in. So we moved into their tracker boat warehouse when they were getting an upgrade. And for 20 years, that was our home. And then we just built one with guidance from the state of Missouri. They wanted to have a facility that could serve the rest of the U.S. And so we were given a green light to go ahead and build it. And if you ever get a chance to visit Springfield, Missouri, you got to visit the Convoy of Hope warehouse. I tell people in San Francisco, we've got a really big tower that gets a lot of attention. I said, if you tip that over sideways, that's what Springfield, Missouri looks like, the headquarters there. So yeah, we are in Springfield. It's put us closer to the food manufacturing plants. It also allows us to get onto the road with trucks from a centralized location where we've got north, south, east, and west covered pretty fast with the highways that go through that town.
Very
Does that
important.
answer
Thank
your
you for
question?
specifying. Yeah. Claire, does it answer like Paul asked? Is that good?
Yes, thank you. That answers my question.
Wonderful.
Claire, I wish I could say it was a strategic move for us, but it wasn't. It was opportunistic. Yeah, but we found out it was a pretty good move, but we didn't mean for it to be that strategic. So it turned out great, but sometimes it's better to be lucky than good.
Anybody
All right.
else?
Any other questions?
Yeah. Anybody else?
I would encourage you guys. We had a disaster in Arizona where they had floods and the roads were washed out, and the kids went out to a group called Rubicon. It's a former veterans that are just amazing in terms of how they help during disasters. Have you ever had those guys come in and speak? The Rubicon Project at all? But they organized a 2-pallet plane that got food up into the reservations that had no running food, water, electricity. But we couldn't get our trucks in there just because everything had washed out. But the Rubicon guys found a plane that could take 2 pallets at a time and started flying supplies from a college location where the college kids would load the pallet with food for each of the destinations that would get them through a week. And within a couple of weeks, the roads were repaired, but their only source of relief was coming from former veterans that were training the college kids to pack the pallets and then load the plane and get the plane near or close to where they could set up food centers. But it is amazing who will pop up, and your ability to pivot and say, hey, it's not our normal way of doing it, but it's the right way to do it. In Alaska, when the waves washed out, it was a disaster that most people didn't even hear about, but the ocean overwhelmed the land masses with a huge storm and isolated a lot of communities. We couldn't get there because normally we would boat in, but the ports were gone. And what they found was a long road through Canada could get us back to a high ground that had not been impacted by the water. But we only found that through a series of drones that could fly over the area and identify unimpacted areas that still had road access. So it took us a while to figure it out, but increasingly our reliance on the sky is becoming part of our everyday plan.
Thanks, Paul. And now a question is coming in from Christian Rochester, one of our Embry-Riddle Worldwide students. And his question is, do you guys work at all outside the continental United States, places such as Alaska, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and others? Yeah, with the Lahaina fires, we were one of the first folks on the ground. We had loaded up a 747 with food supply. We had heard from one of the local churches that the Costco burnt down. And our first response was, can we use your parking lot if we can get food there? And so we were only allowed a few minutes on the tarmac. We unloaded the plane
And we took it to the only place we had permission to store it. FEMA came about 24 hours later and asked why we had set up a relief center, on that church ground. And we just said, because it was the only place that, we had permission to drop off all the pallets of food. And they said, it's a perfect location, but next time we want to pick it. So it was pretty funny. Like, well, we were just trying to move it. And that's kind of what we did. We were willing to move it again if FEMA had picked another site, but they ended up agreeing that this was the best location for it. So yeah, we serve every continent. The reason why we moved back into California with a world-class facility in Sacramento was because it took us so long to get to the tsunamis in Japan, to get relief out there. So we respond globally. Some places are more effective for immediate response, but because we take a long-term approach, we don't just get food there, we get a logistics delivery methodology set up. So we're typically, if it's overseas, it's a year's worth of food will be committed. We can put it to a stop, but we'll commit for a year to getting food to that location, and we can either extend it or shorten it, but we secure all the logistics to take care of those disaster areas. And because we're not government run, we don't have to wait for permission to say go, which is why we don't make more or less money by waiting for the government to tell us when we can go. So we typically go in first and then get corrective instructions afterwards.
That's very important. That's very good to know. And then also there is Julia on the chat. Julia Hoban is assistant professor and also in our college here, and also the program chair for the online Master of Science in Human Security and Resilience. And she says, Thank you for the insightful presentation, Paul. So we can certainly all share that. I'm curious, how do misinformation and disinformation during and after disasters affect your work, and what strategies do you use to address them?
So, we have very strong relationships with people who support us. And we typically, when we see a storm or we have a disaster, either those organizations are calling us with direct eyeballs, and oftentimes we can correct information coming into FEMA that might be misinformed or might be coming from social media places. We don't listen to social media. Social media tends to be people who are looking for eyeballs and attention, and oftentimes they misconstrue geographic and historical accuracies in terms of exaggerating issues. But folks that are trying to take care of individuals, like a community site or a care center or a hub, they tend to know what's going on directly from the people who are walking in right out of the disaster. So we actually have a network of relationships in all areas. In any given town, we probably have 20, 30 different organizations that we can contact or that we have direct contact with. And so we ask for eyeballs on the street from people who have community care responsibilities, and we tend to get accurate information, especially if they're going to gather their people and distribute food, right? So it is a challenge. I think one of the benefits are that we're not taking random phone calls. We're doing direct contact to people in harm's way and getting real-time feedback when it's available. Now, when cell towers are down, we typically call beforehand to find out what their natural gathering sites are, and we will take them to those sites and then get redirected to places that have more or less need. But we'll go in first and we'll go firsthand to those sites, and then we'll typically report back to FEMA what we're seeing.
Thanks, Paul. And
Does that make sense?
The eyeballs on the ground principle also seems to be very nice in line, as information assurance methodology within the whole community approach. So really use representatives of the whole community that you build, that you're part of, and build pre-disaster for accurate information. And Julia says, thank you. This is so great to hear about these practical strategies. As we are approaching the hour, are there any additional claims to the floor, comments, questions, sharing of related own experience? That is
Can I ask you guys a question?
Anytime, of course.
Yeah. When you guys formulate a strategy or a best practice for air response for disasters, would you be willing to come in or host a Zoom for Convoy of Hope for our disaster team, just to hear what you guys are seeing? Because we are very far away from air-driven strategies. We often find innovative groups that have something, but we don't really have a strategy or we're not even sure like what works, what doesn't work out there. So as you guys get close to formulating some best practices and seeing some of the kids invest some of their innovative concepts into addressing disasters, leveraging air strategies, we would love, especially here in the U.S., we would love to hear about some of those and some of the creative ways that we could do a better job.
We would thank you for asking, Paul, and we would be honored and more than happy to do that and then bring our best experts along these lines into a webinar or workshop that can support the Convoy of Hope. Just let us know. You know where we are, right?
Yep, that'd be great. And if you guys come up with something that's brilliant, that's cost efficient and could be a quick response, we're always interested in suggestions for improving the way we take care of communities. But thank
Happy
you.
to provide those. Wonderful. We are approaching the hour. Anybody still? No counting once, twice, 3 times. Then with that, I'm just leaving. If you are interested in our events and then also we are at the midpoint of the 6-month series on emergency management leadership brought to us and to you by our alum Dennis Caliyo. So this is month 3. So that means we still have 3 months to go. If you're interested in signing up for the remaining sessions and then also any other online webinars, online events that we have, I posted our Eventbrite, the link to our Eventbrite page in the chat. Feel free to check it out and to follow us from there. A lot of our participants are saying thank you. Great to hear about what you were sharing. Wonderful presentation and discussion. We can echo that, Paul. Thank you for taking your time. Thank you for being with us. And then thanks everybody for coming. It's great to see you again. It's great to see you if we haven't seen you before. Be safe, be good, and we hope to see you next time. And big thanks to Paul once again. Thank you.
You guys have the presentation and my speaker notes. You guys have both of those in PDF format. So I think, Alexander, those are yours to distribute as you need to.
Thank you so much. We'll do so. Thank you for the clearance.
Okay. Thanks.
Bye-bye.